Hello and welcome to Press TV Spotlight. I'm Marzieh Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, Iran's Navy 86 flotilla has returned to the country after completing its 8th-month mission of sailing around the world. Its 63,000-kilometer trip has broken the record for distance that an Iranian flotilla has sailed in international waters. Now, this despite many warnings and even military threats against Iran while taking on this task. Now, the Den and Macron destroyers were Iranian-made, and all of this has been done while Iran has been and is under heavy economic sanctions. We'll talk about Iran's military achievements on the high seas and beyond on this Spotlight. I'd like to welcome my guests to the program. Out of London, Shabir Razvi, political analyst. And out of Belgrade, John Bosnich, journalist, activist, and political analyst. Thank you both for being with me. Well, Shabir, let me start with you. Tell us about the significance of this flotilla and what it has accomplished.
Hello, good evening, Marzieh. It's good to be back. Thank you very much.
Good to have you.
The significance is really not quantifiable, and you can't measure it because at the same time as your opening comment said that Iran has been under multiple sanctions since its inception 43 years ago as an Islamic Republic. And the sanctions have been vicious. They have obviously inflicted immense pain on ordinary people, all kinds of restrictions. Having said that, any other nation, as I have previously pointed out, would have succumbed by now. But what has happened with the Islamic Republic of Iran, that it has really, progressed leaps and bounds. And this particular flotilla sort of going around the globe in 8 months. And again, in your opening comment, it says lots of issues were involved, the difficulty for it to cross through the Panama Canal itself, all kinds of threats were made. But, with the grace of God, it has actually come back from where it started. So it's an achievement that I think the Iranian nation should be immensely proud. And of course, what's happening globally with the North-South divide and the meeting taking place of the so-called G7 in Hiroshima, it's obviously a signal to all these sort of powers in the West who have been trying to really muzzle Iran and really sort of put it on the sidelines, but it is developing and progressing in all manner and without any sort of support from the West, technologically, intellectually, and militarily. Because at the end of the day, what the Western powers want is that nations should be weak militarily so that they can be dominated. Of course, they use other weapons, economic sanctions, taking Iran out of the international banking system. But nonetheless, as I said, the word remarkable itself doesn't really sufficiently describe what this particular achievement is and overall achievement that has taken place militarily.
All right, Shabir, let me get John in on this discussion. I mean, John, I'm old enough to remember back in the 80s, the Iraqi imposed war on Iran and how Iran was struggling to find military equipment, parts, anything they could. And basically the whole world basically told them no, that they wouldn't give them anything, or it was very difficult for them to get. I want to talk about from the 80s, now we fast forward to today, and we see the type of, whether we're talking about military equipment, we're talking about destroyers right now as far as the ships, and so many other type of equipment that Iran has been able to actually design and create themselves. Let's talk about the significance of this while under sanctions, major economic sanctions.
You know, there's a basic background here that has gone past the Western media viewer. They're not aware of the size of the population of Iran. They don't realize that there are more people in Iran than there are in Turkey. They don't realize the historic past of the Persian Empire. They don't have the basic knowledge about the region to understand Iran's desire to be independent and to be free of Western colonial pressures. So this physical demonstration by the fleet is a re-entry, hopefully, of Iran as a world power in the minds of the people in the West, because the Western military alliance is basically a bully. And we all know that the one thing that scares a bully is a victim who stands up for himself. And that is what Iran has become. And this flotilla's movement across the globe, despite all pressures from America, is the best way to show them that their monopoly of power is over.
Well, Shabir, the commander of the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy, Rear Admiral Shahram Irani, said the naval forces on board the Dina and Macron showed up on the high seas to declare that the Islamic Republic is impervious to isolation and sanctions, and it continues to tread the path of sustainable development through the promotion of interaction with world nations. Your thoughts on this statement?
Well, look, it's very clear that, as our other panelist has quite rightly pointed out, that Iran is an immense power in West Asia now, without any doubt. It's not only that the population is larger than Turkey, but the population of Iran is larger than most of the Arab nations in that particular part of the world. And of course, the universities are doing their work. Intellectual capital is being built. I mean, some years ago, I was attending a sort of a conference in Tehran, and there were, this is about 10 years ago, there were about 300 companies and universities and institutes that were doing research on nanotechnology. So it's not just military. At many, many levels, what Iran is trying to show is that it can be independent. It is not dependent on other nations. And really, the so-called intellectual property that the Western companies and sort of universities try to sort of control the world is that Iran is creating its own intellectual property at many levels. As we know, the whole story of drones, how Iran has been successful in sort of manufacturing and exporting drones now to many parts of the world. At the same time, militarily, it's producing, all kinds of long-range missiles, which, of course, threaten Tel Aviv and so on. And Mr. Netanyahu only very recently said that 95% of the threat to Israel comes from Iran. So really, the Western powers and the nation, the Zionist state that has been created in West Asia, has been really trying to control, manage, and really, at the end of the day, to destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran and so-called regime change. And that has been a perpetual game for the last 43 years. And, internal issues have been created. As I said, economic warfare has been inflicted on the Islamic Republic of Iran, but it continues to progress. And that, I think, is the biggest threat. Okay. Because quite often when one talks about the JCPOA and the nuclear sort of treaty, but at the end of the day, that's, as I've said previously, it's only a red herring. It's really what the West is worried about and concerned is that Iran is able to be strong enough militarily and produce its own products which are originating in Iran itself.
Okay, Shabir. Well, John, just listening to what our other guest in London has said, and if you agree with him, he said that basically the U.S. would be afraid of an independent Iran. Let's talk about that. What does it mean? I mean, why would the United States, why should the United States be afraid of an independent country? Because, I mean, we see on this particular trip, this around the world journey that these ships had taken, they were sanctioned by the U.S., and the U.S. also threatened any other country that would allow these ships to even dock in their countries. I mean, explain it. Go ahead, John.
Idle threats from America, which are not acted upon, are the best proof that America's star is fading. This is the proof. It has to be conducted in this way. You might recall that I've mentioned before that I spent the period of sanctions here in Serbia during the war that America and its allies ran against the former Yugoslavia. I've been on the receiving end of these sanctions. I know what they're like. Their effort is to turn the people against themselves. They ran a color revolution here and deposed the elected president. They took over the country, and we're still trying to recover from the American interference in this country some 20 years later. So I can tell you that we here in another country which has come under the pressure from America, we understand the value of the demonstration that Iran has made. And I can tell you that they are far more focused on emerging powers than they are on major powers like China or Russia, who they know they cannot destroy. So Iran is leading this third world new force of countries through BRICS and through other independent activities that are starting to say, America, no more. You're going to have to recognize our independence, or you will fall from any kind of relationship with the free and independent countries all around the world.
Well, let's talk about that, Shabir, which is what John just talked about with the emerging power of Iran. And he also mentioned China, because what we have seen, a growing alliance between China, Russia, and Iran, and we have seen military maneuvers that have been done together. The significance of that, I mean, 20 years back, we go back 20 years, could you have envisioned this? And what does that mean for the United States?
Well, look, I will sort of just quote what our good friend Pepe Escobar recently wrote. And he said that the leadership of the West is in a sticky swamp of intellectual shallowness. And I think that really encapsulates what's going on, that they will wander here and there, have meetings, conferences, but the reality is that they're not able to sort of fathom the change that is taking place with the relationship developing with Russia, China, and Iran. It's a landmass in Asia, and obviously they're working together on the economic front, on the banking front, and also sort of trading in their own currency. So the whole change that is occurring, and it's occurring at such a pace, and the velocity is so fast that I think the West are really unable to comprehend how it will pan out, let's say, even the next 12 months to 24 months. And I think the West is losing its way if it hasn't already lost its way, because it's, with the war in Ukraine, we can see that how Europe is being completely depleted economically, intellectually, and militarily. And at the same time, they want to sort of take on China with the sort of Taiwan issue, and then, of course, sort of Iran is always being sort of seen as a nation which is, from the Washington perspective, a sort of a troublemaker in the sort of West Asia. But what is happening is that we can see that with the Iran and Saudi sort of rapprochement taking place, and again, Syria, Mr. President Assad being invited to the conference that took place recently in Riyadh. So you can see that there are huge movements and change that is taking place. And I don't think the West can keep pace and they can sort of continue to sort of apply more and more and more sanctions if they like. But the reality is that the so-called Southern Hemisphere nations are now sort of collaborating more and more, and I think that's a sort of a good sign for the world at large. If you like.
Stay with me, Shabir. Well, John, not only has Iran accomplished much on the seas, but militarily we see missile designs and launches or drones and lots of other military accomplishment. And as Shabir said, accomplishments in so many other fields also. But right now we're looking at the military aspect. That Iran has come a long way. I want to talk about, because this is really important, that what the United States does is threaten and sanction and puts enough pressure on countries where they feel that they cannot do anything else, where they have no choice. But despite all of this, Iran has been able to overcome that and advance technologically exponentially. What's key here? What do you think was the key factor in order that Iran has reached where it has reached?
Well, let's step back a little bit. You mentioned that the Americans put sanctions where they can't do anything else, but actually they could always do something else. They could be a normal, non-aggressive democracy as they claimed to be. They could follow the advice and the instructions of George Washington, who in his farewell address told America not to become an empire like the one that they had defeated to win their independence. Everything that America is doing now is contrary to the basis of America's own statehood and to the wishes of the founding fathers, who tried not to make America what it has become today. And what has happened here is that America has become the enemy that it itself fought. Now we're looking at a situation where America, to maintain its own power, has actually knifed Germany in the back by putting Germany on the front line against Russia, by bombing the Germans' Nord Stream pipeline in the biggest eco-terror act in human history, and at the same time pretending to be Germany's friend while they occupy Germany militarily. This is a major error on America's part, and they are going to turn the EU against them, even though they created the EU to make them property of the United States.
Well, Shabir, the commander of Iran's Navy has also said that the great sailing mission of the Iranian Navy's flotilla also confirmed that the U.S.-led liberal world order has been replaced by a multipolar world order, with new alliances being formed and emerging powers beginning to display their might. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not only multipolar, but I would sort of quote here what Henry Kissinger has famously said, that, it's dangerous to be an enemy of America, but it's fatal to be its friend. And that, I think, is becoming very clear. That nations that have, that nations that have regarded themselves to be friends of the USA, as our panelists quite rightly pointed out, Germany has been not only stabbed in the back, but it has been stabbed in the front, in the chest, very clearly. So, it's becoming clear that nations that want to be independent, dignified, and honorable need to develop their own industries, have to stand up on their own feet, irrespective of sanctions, and create their own intellectual capital. Because one of the interesting things is that, there was a story, I think, which was related a little while ago, that Malaysia, when they bought some sort of fighter bombers from America, they had some chips embedded in it, which would sort of monitor exactly what their sort of, military planes were doing. So America does all kinds of things when they sell products, and particularly military products, to other nations, that they are either outdated or redundant, or in a way to be able to monitor and control those nations. So it's better that, a nation like Iran is becoming self-reliant, resilient, and strong to be able to, sort of produce its own military hardware, so that because the other thing is, when you buy any military equipment, the European nations and America controls the supply of spare parts. And this happened at the beginning of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, that most of its planes were not able to fly because they couldn't get the parts from America at that time. So why would a nation invest in its military hardware when parts will not be available 2 years down the road or 10 years down the road when they're needed? So
Okay.
It's good to have your own industry, and that's what I think Iran is doing admirably well.
All right, well, let me give John the last minute. John, your prognosis, where do you see this going as far as the Islamic Republic on the one hand, and then we have the United States on the other hand? Go ahead.
Speaking as a person born in the American colony of Canada, I can tell you that you've made some very wise moves. Canada developed an aircraft called the Avro Arrow, which was far more advanced than any American aircraft, and they shut down. The American government pressured the Canadian government to shut down our aircraft industry, and all of our engineers moved to NASA. I can tell you that independence is the only way to preserve sovereignty. Canada, with a population of 30 million, is an American colony and in name only a sovereign state. And you've seen the performance of our prime minister around the world. What Iran is doing is providing an example, not just to the countries which are allied with China and Russia, but to countries like my own native Canada, where intelligent people can see what's happening, finally.
All right. And on that note, thank you both for being with me. Shabir Razvi, political analyst out of London. John Busnich, journalist, activist, and political analyst out of Belgrade. And thank you, viewers, for being with us on another Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashemi, signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Thanks so much for joining us.